Lecture 1, Settlement of the Americas. Today, we'll talk about the arrival of the first Americans by engaging with several of the most common theories of how native peoples came to occupy North and South America. The first and most widely accepted explanation is the Bering Strait theory. During the last ice age between 20,000 and 14,000 years ago, sea levels dropped several hundred feet, revealing a 600-mile wide land bridge that connected Siberia to Alaska, which are only separated by 51 miles. This area is called Beringia. One of the common misconceptions about the Bering Strait theory is that native Siberians walked across a large sheet of ice to arrive in North America. However, think about what a glacier actually looks like. It's a desolate wasteland devoid of vegetation and animal life. Migrants crossing over a glacier like this would have no way to sustain themselves. To the contrary, Beringia was actually a prairie grassland. Over thousands of years, ancient Siberian hunters lived there and followed game across into what is now Alaska. There's a considerable amount of biological evidence that supports the Beringia migration thesis. As you can see, there are several characteristics that are shared among people of Native American and Native Siberian descent, including shovel-shaped incisor teeth and 3-root molars. DNA analysis has also confirmed ancestral connections between the first Americans and Native Siberians. One caveat to the Bering Strait theory is that in order for people to populate the rest of North and South America, there would have to be a period where the glaciers recede to the point that people could walk out of Alaska and into the rest of North America. Geological evidence indicates that around 15,000 years ago, a 15-mile wide path melted on the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains. We refer to this as the ice-free corridor. When this ice-free corridor first appeared, the land was so wet and marshy that humans and wild animals could not even travel through it, much less live there. Between 13 to 14,000 years ago, this area dried out and became a grass-covered prairie. Early Americans and the game they hunted then made their way through the corridor until they reached the southern end of the glaciers, then dispersed to different parts of North America and eventually South America. There is a problem with this Beringia migration thesis. However, archaeologists have uncovered a number of places in North and South America that show evidence of human habitation prior to 14,000 years ago. Artifacts from the site at Monte Verde, Chile, have been dated at 32,000 years old. If migration out of Alaska wasn't possible until the ice-free corridor opened, this leaves us with a problem. How can people occupy sites that are more than 14,000 years old? The answer to this question is that Beringia can't be the only explanation for how native peoples arrived in the Americas. Now let's explore some of the other theories for how the first Americans arrived here. The first theory is known as the coastal route from Asia, indicated by the black arrow on the right side of the image, which is the most likely alternate explanation for how Native Americans first arrived in the Western Hemisphere. Researchers believe that migrants built boats and floated along the Pacific coast, entering North America south of the glaciers. By 15,000 years ago, the Cordilleran ice sheet had melted to the point that some coastal areas of California were habitable. Remember, this was during a warming period around the same time the ice-free corridor was open but impassable. The problem with this explanation is that we haven't uncovered evidence of boats that would have been used to make that journey. This makes sense, of course, because sea levels were several hundred feet lower at that time. In other words, any boats those early travelers may have used are now buried under the ocean floor. A second possible explanation, indicated by the yellow arrow in the bottom right, is called the South Pacific Route. This theory holds that migrants island hopped from Asia via the various island chains in the South Pacific: Philippines, Indonesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, etc., and eventually landed in South America. Because most of this journey occurred over open ocean, this hypothesis requires more advanced maritime technology than boats that simply float down the coast. Any evidence that can prove this theory has long been lost under the ocean. A third theory is known as the coastal route from Europe, or the Solutrean hypothesis, indicated by the pink arrow on the upper left, which suggests that Stone Age hunters from France, Portugal, and Spain traveled by boat along the western coast of Europe, skirted the southern edge of a glacier that covered the North Atlantic Ocean, then entered North America from the east. Researchers formulated this idea after noting that ancient Solutrean stone tools unearthed in Europe, hence the name, were created using similar techniques that ancient Native Americans employed to create stone toolkits, discovered at archaeological sites throughout the eastern United States. This is by far the most controversial alternate migration theory because of its political implications. Since Native peoples claim original occupancy of North and South America, the possibility that some Native Americans were actually descended from Europeans undermines Native land ownership and be used ex post facto to justify European land seizures and colonizations of the Western Hemisphere. It should be noted that no other evidence has been discovered, biological, archaeological, or otherwise, that supports this idea. Last but not least, Native American religion and folk tales provide their own explanation for the habitation of the Americas. Two such stories are part of the assigned readings for this unit: the Cherokee and the Salinan creation stories. One similarity shared by these and other Indian creation stories is the belief that Native Americans have been here since the beginning, after the creation of the earth, oceans, animals, and land. These stories are not unlike the creation story of Adam and Eve, which is shared among the Abrahamic religions of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, despite the fact that they were created half a world apart, thousands of years before the arrival of the first European explorers. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out the rest of the videos and readings for this unit.